In the late summer of 1944, as American troops were fighting their way across Europe and the Pacific, a very different kind of fear began spreading through the quiet streets of Mattoon, Illinois. Mattoon was the sort of town people described as safe without hesitation. Tree-lined neighborhoods, front porches, screen doors left unlocked on warm nights. The war felt far away, until suddenly it didn't. It started on an August evening. A woman named Mrs. Kearney lay in bed when she noticed a strange, sweet odor drifting through her bedroom window. At first she thought little of it, but within minutes her legs began to tingle. Then they felt heavy. She tried to move and couldn't. Panic set in as she realized she was partially paralyzed. Her husband found her gasping, unable to speak clearly. By the time he reached the window, whatever had drifted inside was gone. The doctor who examined her found no obvious cause, no sign of forced entry, no physical injury, just temporary paralysis and confusion. Within days, other reports followed. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the Dark Ages. Alright, so let's go back to Mattoon in the late summer of 1944. A young mother claimed a similar smell entered her home late at night. She awoke feeling sick and weak. Another family reported that someone had pried at their bedroom window shortly before a strange vapor seeped inside. A teenage girl said she saw a tall, shadowy figure outside her house just before the odor appeared. The descriptions were eerily consistent. A sweet, sometimes floral smell, numbness, weakness, nausea. A fleeting figure in the dark. Mattoon newspapers quickly picked up the story. The headline practically wrote itself, "A mad gasser stalking the town." And once the name existed, the fear began to organize itself around it. Police launched an investigation. Patrols increased. Officers walked the streets at night, flashlights cutting across lawns and hedges. Residents armed themselves with shotguns and baseball bats. Porch lights stayed on until dawn. But there was a problem. There was no physical evidence, no footprints, no containers, no witnesses who could give a clear description beyond vague shapes and shadows. The gasser, as he was soon called, never left anything behind except stories. Yet the stories multiplied. In one case, a man claimed he saw someone fleeing his yard just after his wife fell ill from the odor. In another, a couple reported the smell entered through a crack in the wall. One account even described a man with a tight-fitting cap and dark clothing lurking near a window. Each retelling sharpened the image, and each retelling made it more real. Within weeks, more than 24 incidents were reported. Nearly all followed the same pattern. Nighttime, an open or partially open window, a strange smell, temporary physical symptoms, and a glimpse of someone outside. The town was gripped by something that felt both invisible and intimate. This wasn't a distant war. This wasn't rationing or headlines from Europe. This was something entering bedrooms. But as investigators dug deeper, cracks began to appear in the narrative. Doctors examined the victims. Most symptoms were mild and short-lived. Numbness, dizziness, nausea, occasional vomiting. No long-term damage, no consistent medical findings. Some physicians began to question whether the gas was real at all. Police found no chemical residue in the homes, no devices, no containers, nothing that suggested an actual weapon. And yet the fear persisted. It's important to remember the timing. This was 1944. The world was at war. Americans had been warned repeatedly about enemy sabotage, about spies on home soil. Gas attacks were not a distant memory. The First World War had etched images of mustard gas into the public imagination. Civil defense drills were common. Rumors of Japanese balloon bombs drifting across the United States were circulating. The idea of a chemical attack, even a small one, did not feel impossible. In fact, it felt plausible. And plausibility is often all fear needs. As the weeks passed, skepticism grew louder. Some investigators suggested that if a real anesthetic gas had been used, it would have required professional handling and would likely have left detectable traces. Others pointed out that the reported smells varied widely. Sometimes sweet, sometimes foul, sometimes like flowers, sometimes like something burning. The descriptions of the attacker were just as inconsistent. Tall, short, thin, heavy, wearing dark clothes, wearing light clothes, a phantom shaped by imagination. One theory began to take hold quietly among officials: mass hysteria. Or, as it was often called at the time, war nerves. The idea was uncomfortable. It implied that the community itself had manufactured the threat, that fear had become contagious, that the mind under stress could create physical symptoms. But history offers precedent. In times of uncertainty, small, unexplained sensations can grow into shared conviction. A strange smell in the night, a moment of dizziness, a shadow that might have been a tree branch. Once a narrative exists, a mad gasser, it becomes a lens through which everything is interpreted. A creek becomes a prowler, a household odor becomes poison. By early September, the reports began to taper off. No arrests were made, no suspect was ever identified. Eventually, the police announced they believed the incidents were likely the result of imagination and anxiety rather than an actual criminal. The mad gasser simply vanished. But the story didn't. Even decades later, Mattoon's Strange Summer remains one of America's most puzzling episodes of collective fear. Was there truly someone experimenting with chemicals in the dark? A local prankster? A disturbed individual testing the limits of terror? Or was it something more elusive, an outbreak not of gas, but of belief? Some residents maintained until their deaths that what they experienced was real. They insisted on the smell, the paralysis, the figure outside the window. To them, it was not hysteria, it was an attack. Others look back on it as a case study in how communities react under pressure. A small town already living under the strain of global war, suddenly confronted with an invisible threat that mirrored the anxieties of the time. The truth may lie somewhere in between. What makes the mad gasser of Mattoon endure is not simply the mystery of whether he existed. It's what the story reveals about human vulnerability, about how quickly fear can travel, about how the line between external threat and internal panic can blur in the dark. In 1944, Mattoon locked its doors and scanned its yards for a shadowy figure who may never have been there. But for a few weeks, the gas felt real. And sometimes, that's enough. If you enjoyed this one, make sure you like the video and subscribe for more strange and unsettling history. Drop your theory in the comments, real attacker, or mass hysteria. I'll see you in the next one.